I wasn't supposed to be awake. Technically, I was still in the hospital, resting after what the doctors dramatically called a mild cardiac event. Mild, my foot I've had chili that hit me harder. They had me sedated like I was some kind of wild animal, just because I told a nurse she looked like my high school gym teacher. She did. And Coach Harper had a mustache too. Anyway, the hospital was letting me go home for the weekend under the care of my loving family. Keyword, loving. So imagine me, old Harold Buckley, slippers on, hospital bracelet still flapping, walking into my own dang house and hearing that. What could possibly go wrong when your son thinks you're asleep? Forever? It was supposed to be a quick stop. I needed my wallet, some insurance papers, and my spare pair of glasses, the ones that don't make me look like an 1800s librarian. Martha, my late wife, God rest her soul, kept everything in that little wooden file cabinet by the stairs. I didn't tell anyone I was stopping by the house. Figured I'd be in and out before my son Greg even noticed. He and his wife Denise had moved in to help me out while I recovered, which mostly meant eating my food and arguing about which subscription boxes to cancel. So I let myself in with a spare key hidden in the garden gnome's butt, and no, I'm not proud of that sentence, and started walking toward the study. That's when I heard it, Greg's voice. In the living room, calm, cold, like he was talking about the weather. If this old man doesn't wake up by Monday, everything's ours. The house, the savings, everything. Denise giggled, like they were planning a vacation, not dancing on my grave. I froze. My hand was on the doorknob. I hadn't been spotted yet. For a second, I thought I was hallucinating. Maybe the meds were messing with me again. Last week I swore I saw a squirrel drive off with my sandwich. But no, it was real. Crystal clear. My own son. My own blood. What do you do when you hear your son plotting your funeral while your coffee's still warm? You ever feel your stomach drop so fast your pants almost fall with it? That's how it felt. I just stood there, behind the doorframe, gripping a folder of life insurance documents like it was a weapon. My heart wasn't racing, it was packing its bags. Greg, my boy, the same kid who once cried because he thought the moon would follow him home and get stuck in the garage. The same kid I taught to ride a bike, even though he ran over Mrs. Pendleton's cat on the second day. And now he was sitting on my recliner like a smug little landlord in loafers. Denise, bless her Botoxed soul, was sipping a kale smoothie in my house. You know what kale tastes like? Guilt and lawn clippings. Anyway, she leaned over and said, I mean, babe, we've been so patient. He's had like weeks to get better. If he doesn't, it's just natural. Natural? What is this? A nature documentary? Here we observe the elderly in their final days, while the offspring wait patiently to inherit the remote control and a paid-off Toyota. I didn't say a word. Not yet. I should have stormed in, thrown a slipper, maybe. But something stopped me. Not fear, not shock. It was the ridiculousness of it all. I mean, really, these two vultures couldn't even wait till Monday? What did they think? I was going to go peacefully during a rerun of Wheel of Fortune. I took a step forward, not out of courage, but because my leg cramped, and that's when everything changed. So I limped forward, quietly, careful not to let my hospital sock squeak on the hardwood. I wish I could say I looked majestic, like Clint Eastwood stepping into a saloon. But truth is, my robe was flapping open on one side. I was still wearing the paper underwear, and I'm 78 with knees that sound like popcorn in the microwave. They didn't notice me at first. Too busy planning my financial funeral. Greg had a folder open on the coffee table, my folder. I recognized the corner where I'd spilled barbecue sauce back in '97. He was pointing at it with a pen, like some Wall Street weasel. This is the investment account. Once probate clears, we'll list the house. Zillow says we can get 6 figures easy, even with the mold. Mold? That's not mold. That's the basil plant I tried to grow during lockdown. Yes, it's dead. But it had a name, Barry the Basil. Show some respect. Denise nodded. And his truck, that old Ford. I already asked around. Jimmy down the street wants it for parts. We could use the garage space for a home gym. I nearly choked. A home gym? Greg hasn't done a push-up since the Clinton administration. And the truck? That truck drove me to my wedding. Drove Greg to kindergarten. Drove a raccoon to the vet once, long story. I was trembling. Not from anger, not yet. It was the shock, the sadness, and, okay, maybe the meds. Those things could tranquilize a bear. But more than anything, I felt like I didn't know them. These weren't my people. These were characters from some twisted sitcom. And just when I was about to turn back, Denise said something that stopped me colder than the popsicles in the garage freezer since 2003. She twirled her straw, slurping the last of that ghastly green goo, and said, "Honestly, babe, your dad's kind of outdated. I mean, he doesn't even stream anything. Outdated. Like I was a fax machine. Like I came with a rotary dial and smelled faintly of mothballs and regret." Greg chuckled, and replied, "Yeah, well, he still writes checks at the grocery store. That's a red flag. I'll tell you what a red flag is. Marrying someone who thinks avocado toast is a personality trait. But here's the thing that really hit me. It wasn't the insults. I've got thicker skin than a Thanksgiving turkey. It was the casualness. The way they talked about me like I was already a memory. Like I'd passed away during an episode of Matlock and they were just waiting on Amazon to ship the urn. My foot brushed against a creaky floorboard. Greg flinched. "Did you hear that?" he whispered. Denise glanced around. "Maybe it's the cat." "They don't have a cat. They never had a cat. Greg's allergic. The cat was me. Grandpa Ghost, apparently." I ducked behind the coat rack, which let me tell you is not built for stealth missions. One of my old trench coats flopped over my face, and I nearly sneezed myself into the afterlife. I should have left. Walked away with what was left of my dignity and a slightly damp insurance folder. But no. Something inside me, stubbornness, pride, spite, flared up. If they wanted to treat me like I was gone, fine. I'd give them a haunting they'd never forget. So I tiptoed into the kitchen, armed with nothing but an old banana, a bottle of ranch dressing, and a plan. Now, I'm no James Bond. The last time I moved quickly, it was to chase a squirrel out of my tomato garden, and I threw out my hip for a week. But that day, something awakened in me. Call it senior vengeance. Call it righteous revenge. Call it gas from the hospital pudding. I crept into the kitchen like a legend. The fridge made a weird wheezing sound when I opened it, sounded like it was dying too, but I found what I needed. One overripe banana, soft as a handshake in July, and a half-used bottle of ranch with questionable intentions. Perfect. I placed the banana on the floor behind the hallway rug. Not a trip hazard, no sir, just a mild inconvenience. Then I dabbed a small dot of ranch on the front door handle. Petty? Absolutely. But you try staying dignified after hearing your son call you outdated while sipping a smoothie that looks like pond water. Then I found the ultimate weapon, my old answering machine, still plugged in, still loaded with my outgoing message from 1996. "Hi, this is Harold. I'm not home. Probably out getting a haircut or trying to remember why I walked into a room. Leave a message." Vintage. I pressed play, and the message echoed through the hallway like a ghost from the golden age of dad jokes. Greg and Denise both froze. "What the? Was that him?" Greg said, voice suddenly tight. Denise clutched her phone like it could save her soul. "You said he was at the hospital." I thought he was." I peeked out from behind the pantry, feeling like Batman if Batman had sciatica, and I smiled. They hadn't seen me yet, but oh, they were about to, and I was going to make an entrance so dramatic it would make soap operas jealous. I waited just long enough for the fear to marinate. Let them stew in it, like Denise's lentil casserole, which once cracked a Pyrex dish and possibly my tooth. Greg tiptoed toward the hallway like he expected to find my ghost knitting on the stairs. He peeked around corners like a cartoon burglar, holding my old umbrella like a weapon. The same umbrella, by the way, I used to whack a raccoon off the bird feeder. True story. The raccoon won. Denise stayed frozen in the recliner, whispering, "What if he came home early? What if he heard us?" "Oh, I heard you all right, sweetheart. Every syllable." like a courtroom transcript only with more avocado talk and less shame. I could have revealed myself right then. I could have cleared my throat like a proper adult and asked, "Would anyone like to explain why you're redecorating my living will?" But no. Instead, I made my move. I took the wireless speaker from the kitchen drawer, the one Greg never figured out how to pair with his phone, and connected it to mine. Then I opened Spotify and played something dramatic. Not just any song. Oh no. Also, Sprack Zarathustra, you know the one from 2001, A Space Odyssey. The moment that first note blasted through the house, Denise screamed like she'd seen a ghost in cargo shorts. Greg dropped the umbrella. It hit the floor with a sad thunk, like his dignity. Then I stepped out, slowly, menacingly, dramatically, wearing nothing but my hospital robe, socks, and the expression of a man who just realized he owns the Wi-Fi password. Greg gasped. Denise dropped her smoothie. And I, Harold Buckley, finally said the 5 words I'd been dying to deliver. "I'm not dead yet, Greg." That's what I said. Plain, calm, with just a dash of menace and a sprinkle of, "You're grounded for life." Greg's face turned the color of skim milk. Denise dropped her phone into the ranch bottle, poetic justice. He stammered, "Dad, I thought you were... the hospital said..." "Oh, I was resting," I said, stepping forward like the ghost of common sense. But then I remembered something important. I paused. "Turns out, my funeral's already been planned. Just needed the playlist and maybe a smoothie menu." Silence. You could hear Denise's lashes blinking. Now let me paint you the picture. There I stood, robed, ruffled, emotionally betrayed but still upright like a budget superhero whose powers included sarcasm and cholesterol. And across from me, Greg, my adult son, 42 years old, 2 college degrees, and right now, looking like a 6th grader caught drawing mustaches on the class photo. "I can explain," he blurted. I raised an eyebrow so high, it almost called the fire department. "Really? Because I heard you say, and I quote, 'If he doesn't wake up by Monday, it's all ours.' You know, Greg, most people wait for the will reading, not the body cooling." Denise, bless her glassy-eyed panic, tried to pivot. "We were just joking. Dark humor. You know, millennials use it to cope." "Oh," I said, nodding. "I must have missed that TED Talk. How to emotionally rob your dad before breakfast." But just as I was winding up to deliver the lecture of a lifetime, Greg said something that hit harder than any insult he'd ever thrown. Greg looked at me, really looked at me, and for a second, the smug vanished. What came next, though, was worse than anything I expected. He muttered, "You wouldn't understand, Dad. You've always had everything figured out. We're drowning here." I blinked. That threw me off. "What do you mean drowning?" "You live in my house. You eat my groceries. You use my shampoo, and I know because the scent changed from Old Spice to Coconut Bliss." Greg sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose like I was the one giving him a headache. "Denise lost her job. My hours got cut. We're barely making payments on her car. The credit cards are maxed. And we didn't know what else to do." Denise sniffled, nodding. Her mascara was melting like a sad raccoon. "We were scared. We thought maybe if something happened, we could at least stay afloat." I stood there, stunned. Not because they were struggling, but because they never told me. They just smiled through dinners, took my remote, and streamed The Bachelor on my Netflix. "Son," I said, softer now, "you'd rather wait for me to drop dead than talk to me?" Greg shrugged. "It's embarrassing, Dad. You've always been this fortress. The guy who had an emergency fund for his emergency fund. You saved every receipt since 1978. Which is true. I still have one from Sears for a waffle iron that exploded once. Long story, don't ask Denise. "And what was your plan, huh?" I asked. "Hope I died of guilt? Or indigestion?" They looked at each other. Shame. Regret. Maybe a touch of gas from the smoothie. But before I could let sentiment ruin my righteous momentum, I decided to shift gears with one final test of character that neither of them saw coming. I took a deep breath, the kind you take before doing something that'll either make you a legend or a headline. "All right," I said, clearing my throat dramatically. Let's make it official. Greg blinked. What? What do you mean? I mean, I said, walking over to the kitchen table and slapping down the insurance folder like it was a royal decree. If you two are so ready to manage my affairs, let's pretend I'm gone. Denise's jaw dropped. Wait, what? You wanted the house? Congratulations! You're now responsible for the broken water heater, the leaky garage roof, and Cousin Marlene's annual visit that smells suspiciously of mothballs and regret. Greg looked horrified. Oh, and the cat that doesn't exist? Yeah, he's yours now. His name is Chairman Meow. He's imaginary, and he's feral. I kept going, momentum now fully turbo, charged by years of pent-up grandpa energy. The truck needs a new carburetor. The lawn needs mowing twice a week, and if you skip, old Mrs. Delaney will call code enforcement again. And the mailbox? It leans. It leans. Greg. Denise looked like she wanted to faint into a decorative throw pillow. Greg rubbed his temples. Dad, come on, that's not fair. I leaned in, dropping my voice like a seasoned actor in a courtroom drama. No, son. What's not fair is finding out your own kid is checking the calendar for your expiration date like your spoiled milk. They went quiet. Real quiet. Like the Wi-Fi just died during a Zoom call. Then I said, let's see if you really want the life you were so eager to inherit. And just when I thought the guilt was sinking in, Denise opened her mouth and proved that rock bottom has a basement. Denise looked up, blinking like a deer caught in both headlights and a moral dilemma. Then she said, and I quote, well, I mean, if we do take the house, maybe we can Airbnb the guest room? Airbnb. I stared at her. I stared so long I started wondering if I had, in fact, died, and this was some bizarre afterlife test. You want to turn my home, I said slowly. The one where I raised Greg, where we used to carve turkeys and argue about gravy lumps, into a bed and breakfast for strangers named Chad in Brooklyn. She hesitated. Only on weekends? Greg buried his face in his hands like he was auditioning for a shampoo commercial titled Despair. I turned away before I said something unholy. Instead, I looked around my kitchen. Same fridge held together with duct tape and prayer. Same coffee mug that says, Hasson Dad, cracked but still in use. Same silly magnet from Yellowstone I bought after I fell into a bush trying to take a selfie with a bison. This was my life, my quiet, flawed, wonderful little castle. And these two, these rookies in adulting, were ready to turn it into a smoothie bar with throw pillows. I took a breath. Maybe for oxygen, maybe to prevent spontaneous combustion. Greg, I said, let me tell you something. He looked up, scared, ashamed, still a little blotchy. Being broke isn't a crime. Being lost? Normal. But making me the villain in your get out of adulting free card, that's where you cross the line. Greg nodded slowly. I just didn't know how to ask for help, he mumbled. You ask by asking. I shot back, not by measuring me for a pine box and downloading mortgage apps. At that moment, the doorbell rang, and what happened next added just the right amount of chaos to my emotional victory. Ding dong. The doorbell echoed through the house, like a dramatic drum roll in a courtroom movie. We all froze. Greg stiffened, like a possum in headlights. Denise clutched the armrest like the chair was about to launch her into space. I, naturally, remained calm, because after the morning I'd had, the Grim Reaper himself could have been at the door and I'd have offered him decaf. Are you expecting someone? I asked, raising an eyebrow. Greg shook his head, wide-eyed. No, no, I swear, Denise whispered. What if it's, like, the police? For what? I snapped. Attempted inheritance? Planning a smoothie-based coup? I shuffled over, still in my hospital slippers, and opened the door like a man fully prepared to find either a SWAT team or a Girl Scout. Instead, there stood Carl Henderson, my next-door neighbor, in cargo shorts, at 11 a.m., holding a weed whacker and a sheet cake. Hey, Harold, he beamed. Heard you were dead. Brought cake, Denise gasped. Greg looked like he'd just swallowed a spoon. I blinked. Carl, I said, how exactly did you hear that? Oh, well, Your son mentioned at poker night that you were in the hospital and probably wouldn't make it past the weekend. Thought it was a joke, but you never know these days. You want vanilla or chocolate? I turned to Greg, slowly. He looked like a man caught shoplifting socks during Christmas. You told the poker group I was dying? Greg stammered. I may have emotionally exaggerated? Carl added. Also, Denise asked if she could use your shed for her vision board studio. What's that, by the way? Denise turned a shade of red not seen in nature. I looked back at Carl, took the cake, and said, Thanks, Carl. I'm alive. But I'll eat this like a ghost if I have to. He saluted with the weed whacker and left. And as I shut the door, cake in hand, I knew exactly how to finish this family drama with the one punishment millennials fear most. I set the cake on the counter slightly tilted, frosting smudged, but oddly perfect like my whole dang day. Then I turned to Greg and Denise, who now looked like two kids caught spray painting the principal's car. You know what? I said, grabbing a fork. Let's talk about consequences. Greg swallowed hard. Denise tried to smile, which landed somewhere between please don't sue us and I'm about to faint. No yelling? Greg asked, hopeful. No yelling, I said. No sermons. No slipper. Throwing. Just a new arrangement. I leaned against the fridge, dramatic pose, foot up on the linoleum, channeling my inner grandpa, Clint Eastwood. You two want to stay here? Fine. But this house has rules now. They both perked up. Greg nodded like a man trying to dodge eviction. Anything. Of course. Whatever you need. First, I said, you pay rent, modest. Fair. I'm not running a cruise ship. Greg nodded. Second, you mow the lawn. Every Saturday. Not Sunday. Saturday. Before 10 a.m. Old man Delaney across the street starts polishing his binoculars at 10:01. Denise winced. We can do that. And third, I continued, you attend weekly family budget meetings with yours truly. No more pretending your problems are invisible. Greg groaned. Dad, I held up a finger. Every Sunday night, PowerPoints welcome, spreadsheets required, snacks optional. And if we don't? Denise asked quietly. I smiled the smile of a man who'd been disrespected, resurrected, and now controlled the thermostat again. Then I call cousin Bernice and tell her she can move in. You remember Bernice, right? The one with 6 cats and the loud night terrors? They both gasped like I'd threatened them with an IRS audit. Greg threw his hands up. Okay, fine. We'll do it. I nodded, satisfied. Then picked up the fork again, cut a slice of Carl's cake, and said, and I get the last piece of dessert, forever. That's not a rule. That's law. It was almost over, but before I closed the curtain on this family farce, I had one last heartfelt truth to deliver, and it had nothing to do with rent. We sat down at the kitchen table, the same one where Greg used to do his homework, and where Denise once accidentally glued her hair extensions during a DIY spa night. Yes, that happened. No, I don't bring it up at Thanksgiving. Much. Greg stared at his hands. Denise stirred her water like it was soup. And me? I just looked at them. Really looked. Grown adults. Scared. Embarrassed. A little lost. And, okay, maybe not the greatest planners in the world, but still my people. I cleared my throat. Look, I know I'm a lot. I know I've got opinions older than TikTok, and a blood pressure monitor that goes off more than a car alarm. Greg let out a weak chuckle. But I'm also the guy who loves you. Both of you. Even when you're planning my ghost-themed retirement. Denise gave a tiny snort. She looked up, eyes a little watery. We really messed up, huh? You did, I said, but not beyond repair. That's the thing about family. We yell, we screw up, we say things like, he doesn't stream, but we also forgive, we show up, we learn. Greg nodded quietly. We don't deserve that. No, maybe you don't, I said, biting into another slice of cake. But lucky for you, I'm old, stubborn, and sentimental as heck. I paused. I've lost people, Greg. Your mom, friends, good neighbors. And I'll tell you this, the only thing worse than dying is dying while your family forgets to care when you're still alive. That landed. Heavy. Quiet. Denise reached out, placing her hand on mine. We'll do better. I promise. I smiled. You better. Otherwise I will haunt this house, and I'll rearrange your furniture just enough to stub your toes every night for eternity. Greg snorted. Deal. And just like that, with cake crumbs, tear glimmers, and one heartfelt threat of afterlife revenge, it was time to close the book on this absurd, beautiful mess. Life's funny. You spend decades raising a kid, teaching him how to ride a bike, balance a checkbook, and not microwave foil. And then one day, you overhear him trying to budget your death over brunch. But here's what I've learned, and trust me, I've got enough gray hair to qualify as a philosopher. People screw up. They panic. They say the wrong thing. Sometimes, they even try to turn your home into a smoothie-powered Airbnb. But if you shut them out, if you let pride take the wheel, you lose twice. Greg and Denise stayed. They helped fix the water heater after watching 6 YouTube videos and electrocuting themselves mildly twice. They mow the lawn. They even show up to the Sunday budget meetings. Greg brings spreadsheets. Denise brings snacks, progress. And me? I'm still kicking, still drinking bad coffee, still watching Matlock reruns and yelling at squirrels like they owe me rent. But now, the house is alive again, not because it's full, but because it's trying. Love isn't a perfect picture. It's a messy kitchen, an awkward apology, a second chance, and maybe a neighbor who brings cake when he thinks you're dead. So, if you're out there, feeling forgotten or frustrated by your family, let me tell you this. You're not outdated. You're not disposable. You're the glue, even if it smells like ointment and arthritis cream. And sometimes, the greatest legacy you can leave is sticking around long enough to remind everyone how much you still matter. Subscribe for more stories about dignity, second chances, and a dash of sweet justice. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? I read everyone with a smile.